Welcome to Kingdom Coffee. Let's talk about that.
Let's do that.
All right, cool. I have with me today Jesse Rivas. To clear all of the rumors, questions, no, he is not my biological brother, but he is definitely a brother in Christ. And he kind of was adopted into our family by my oldest sister and brother-in-law. And there's a fun story in that. But it's kind of wild. He literally had our last name. That's my maiden name. Mm-hmm. If you want to tell a little bit.
Yeah, I could.
It's a good thing. It was a great story.
Bring kind of the foundation of even my testimony too with the Lord. But yeah, I wasn't a Christian for most of my life, and then met her oldest sister. We were in the same apartment complex, and my dad was really good friends with her husband, Doug. Mm-hmm. And I was a young 10-year-old kid, and I just, for some reason, thought they were really cool. Of course, the family's really cool, but they were 8 years older than me, and I just, we went over there and played games together, and I'm like, yeah, like they're the wife's, Autumn's maiden name was my last name. That's really interesting.
So interesting.
Fast forward a few years, my dad moved on. Well, and there was a situation, go into details, but I was never really abandoned, but he did, when I was 15 years old, he went back to our hometown, and I stayed. I chose to stay. And part of that was what do you want to do? Do you want to come with me, or do you want to stay and live? And he asked him ahead of time, Doug and Autumn, being the caregivers for me for the last 3 years of my childhood. They said, yeah. I guess Autumn was praying about it, and she felt like they were taking me to church already.
Yeah.
They were already influencing me, and she just felt like it may be a good time to say yes. And so cool. I moved in with them and spent 3 years, and Doug had a hilarious story because you guys kept living with him too, and he's like, no more Rivases. We're not going to have any more Rivases live in our house, and here I come, not being officially part of the family, but then I adopted you guys, and it was a lot of fun.
So cool. Yeah. Just God's hand in that completely.
Yeah, and I found God through
yes,
family. Yeah,
you did.
Family.
That is so amazing, and that's really encouraging to me because it's always back to, are we going to stop for the one?
Yeah.
And I had a lot of my life thinking that the one is not enough, and so I need to get bigger crowds so that it matters.
Yeah.
And God would keep sending the one, and it would be like, okay, I will, but when am I going to do the big stuff?
Am I not big enough for you?
That counts. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's how it would make the person feel.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize you inside are believing, okay, if I do good in this, then I'll be trusted with that. But it's actually about every single instance. It all matters, and it's all connected.
Loving the one in front of you.
Yeah. And it's actually harder to love the one in front of you than to love the masses, because then there's no face, no name. You can hide on stage. You can hide behind the crowds. It's very interesting. It's actually in the trenches is where it's the hardest.
Yeah.
With the one-on-one. Takes your time.
Oh, yeah. Just get in the trenches and love that one in front of you.
It's true. It's true. I had someone reaching out to me, and it was kind of when things were unfolding in a more busy way for my life and ministry and things. And this person literally came to my doorstep, and I knew it was God. And I, of course, said yes and wanted to help. But on the other hand, I was like, Lord, if this is how much investment it takes for one person, how am I going to have time to actually reach a lot of people?
Yeah.
And I was watching a show that night, and literally on the show, he said the last name of the person I was ministering to. And he says, like a coach, Rivas. It's not about, and he says Rivas, but it was a different last name. It's not about the 1,000. It's about the one.
Come on.
I was like, oh my gosh. I hear you, Coach. Coach Jesus. I repent. So he's really been having to work on me in my heart in that, because I so want to make sure I'm doing as much as I can for the kingdom. And I feel like I finally at 44 understand the value of the one.
And that's good. And yeah, it's all uphill from here.
Good.
Yeah, all uphill from here. But you're right. It's the turning things around. It's the upside down kingdom. And I feel like there's probably people watching too that maybe have the reverse story, where they're all about the one maybe, and they need to be more put in public eye and whatever. But it is true that in our backgrounds, I had the same kind of thing. Like, how can I make a difference? How can I change the world? How can time is of the essence. I want to do the most I can, and sometimes slowing down and just being present and being, now that I'm married, and just being present. I can be so busy doing ministry and all this stuff. I get it now. It's like, be present with the one. So that's really,
and that you can tell when someone's there and when someone's not there, emotionally and bandwidth. Yes. It's like, okay, I am taking up your time, aren't I? All right, I'll just let you go.
Yeah, you can tell.
But it made me think of your business, because you have Above the Sun, and I noticed you started adding the tagline, change the world.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, there's actually two stories there. Okay. The change the world actually came from Josh, and he's a pastor, brother.
My big brother.
Big brother, yeah. And it just was so funny. One time he gave a message. And it just, because there's he had like the
aisle.
The aisle, that's what it is. I could say alley. Yes. But he gave this word, and he closed the Bible, and he says, "Go change the world," and he just walked off stage. And it's like, I don't know if he intended to do it, but
mic drop.
Yeah, it was like the pastor mic drop, and it's just obviously it was attached to his lapel, but it's just impacting me so much. I'm like, I'm gonna use that now. From now on, that's my catchphrase. Every time somebody leaves, I'm gonna say change the world, and I just stuck with it, which is really good.
That's funny. You also mentioned, I remember you saying before, that sometimes it felt almost like a joke, like you're being sarcastic, like go change the world.
Yeah.
But so explain now how you've taken it to the positive. I mean, you're a joking person and sarcasm.
I'm always real. But yeah, so my business is, I mainly work with authors right now. That's kind of my background. I'm a writer, and just learned how to help other writers. I self-published, and I learned the industry, all that kind of stuff. But I love mentorship. I love really coming along people and getting to what you were saying about changing the world. If an author comes and says, "Hey, I just have a book. I want to make all this money publishing this one book," and I'm not necessarily as interested as I am with somebody who says, "Well, I have this topic, or I have this thing that I want to do with my life," right?
Yeah.
And because I think a book oftentimes is like step 1, or can be step 10, but it's like it's not the end all. It's like the authority to get into a speaking topic, or into, even with marketing, people talk about, I don't want to market. Well, maybe you shouldn't necessarily go put yourself out in the public then so much if you don't believe in your topic.
A very good point.
And I always tell people, if you have the cure for cancer, would you not tell somebody about it, right? And if you believe in your book or your project or your acting or any creative thing you do, if you don't believe it enough to tell people, then why are you doing it? And so that's why I think that the change the world aspect is really important to me, to help people move into a movement versus just a project.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. And it's funny because I told you I came from the perspective of wanting the bigger reach and influence, etc. And so for me, my goal was always to change the world. And now I've switched back to the one in front of me. And the Lord has worked on our foundation of God first, marriage, family, then ministry, career, etc.
Yeah.
And so that's funny. I love that, though, what you're saying behind it. And it's true. And I guess you could think of, what is the world to you?
Yeah, what's your
Could
metron?
Be your world, your metron. And is it Chris Valentin or Dan
Think
McCollum that does the Metrons.
All of them.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you bring a good point. When I came back from ministry school, that is kind of what God talked to me about, because I did go down to ministry school trying to change the world.
Right.
Like, I'm like, oh, how am I going to be elevated and do all this really cool thing? And then COVID happened down there. I spent the terrible years of my like inner healing and all this stuff, right? And so I'm just
change your world.
I'm just trying not to die the whole time. And then I came back thinking that, I'm going to come back to my hometown. I'm going to be like the Hobbits, that much taller. Your nerd references out there. But I came back and everyone's the same. And I've changed, but I'm like, I felt kind of embarrassed. Like I went away to this powerful thing, and I come back and I'm different, but I'm not doing anything different. And
putting the pressure on.
I was single still at the time, hitting 40 and all these things, and running a room from a family and just feeling like a complete just like dummy, so a little bit, in some ways. Like, what am I doing? Trying to build my business. At the time, I had my business. But speaking of Metron, God says, you have this room to influence. This is your Metron, right? And take care of this room, clean your room, make your bed, like Jordan Peterson says, these kind of things.
Yes, yeah, I like that
one. And just really own that. And a part of me is now I'm working on a book. I want to call it like maybe even Reluctant Reformers or something along those lines. Where it's
I like it.
Where I'm just kind of like, God taught me how to be a reformer by just owning my own space, and then you kind of increase, like Jerusalem today, that kind of thing. You go out and you get a bigger tent, or you get a bigger area.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
that's really cool. So as far as your business, what would people come to you for exactly?
Yeah, so it is mostly authors,
okay.
And that is something that my authority and my Metron. If I eventually would love to be a business coach and these kind of things, but I'm not necessarily there to be mentoring business owners yet. But I am good at mentoring authors, and so my tagline is inspiration to publication. If you have an idea for a book, or if you have a book finished. If you need editing, if you need publishing, I basically do the gamut. I'm kind of I do all the things that authors don't like to do.
Yes, yes. He was so helpful to me. When I would get to the stuck point of like vomiting my idea out, write it all out, and then no.
Yes.
He's very good actually at seeing the order of it. I feel like you're really good at that, and just bringing that clarity and like, okay, I don't know where you're going with this. You really want to go off on that, or should you reel it in and da 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 da? I just really appreciated that in him helping me out. I highly recommend that. And I finally talked my mom into presenting her book. She's been working on it for 20 years, over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I literally have had to like work at her, like, please give it to someone else. You need this at this point. Because she just kept being like, I'm so stuck and I don't know which part to include and which part. And it was like, Mom, ask for help. So finally she did. And her book is published.
Done. Victory.
Love covers. I'll put the link on this because, side note, I didn't mean to go off on this, but great. It is fun when you see authors published. And it's my mom, so I'm really proud of her. 10 kids, homeschooled. Like, she's a pioneer in many areas, and she really just found the Lord reading the Bible, lived an on-fire life since the day she got saved, and just an incredible real-life story, of God meeting you in the midst of anything.
Huge victory. Absolutely.
Huge victory.
I mean, and that's the best thing about it is, it's like, you could, like you said, thank you for the structure thing. I do believe that's called the developmental editing.
Yes.
That's where my passion is.
He's very good at that.
It's helping develop, and then, I do that in coaching and these kind of things as well. But like you said, I mean, it's such a passion of mine to see other people's vision be established.
That's so cool.
So it is. So it's a win. It's a win.
It is, and so helpful. And basically, you don't have to be local. Like anyone can reach out.
Yeah.
And my goal with Kingdom Coffee, we were talking about this morning, is basically to have people know who is in our region doing the stuff. and how can you connect, and how can we grow as
Mm-hmm.
the organic body of Christ. We've kind of only known the church organization model for
Yeah.
so long
Yeah.
that I didn't even know there was another way, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think many of us have felt that way because you get used to something, it works for a while, but you don't always notice when things have shifted and maybe we need to make some shifts. So I'm kind of segueing into this because this is another of my heart for Kingdom
Mm-hmm.
Coffee is to talk about these things. And God called us out of the church organization in 2019. And that literally blindsided both my husband and I because we both were feeling that we were being called out of the church that we were in at the time. And we didn't know what he was calling us into.
Yeah.
And so we obeyed, and we had a year and a half of not going to any church organization. And then, and in that midst of that time was just questioning everything. Like, did we hear God? Are we okay? Is this Abraham or is this rebellion? You know, like, are we fine? Are we
Mm-hmm.
being deceived? You know, like I really was asking all the questions because my heart is never to stray from God's plan, to stray from connection to the body. We're called to keep fellowship, connection, yeah, collaboration. It's all part of the family.
Yeah.
I believe in family big time. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit with you because it's been fun, but also you get, you know, some raised eyebrows and people worrying like, oh, what are you doing? Like, don't tell people not to go to church. What are you doing? Well, that's not my goal to tell you to not go to church. My goal is let's think outside the box a little. The model of the church box, the church organization.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's more to it.
Maybe there is.
Yes. And so also in the midst of it, I have people that I love who love going to church, and that's fine by me. I just have needed the freedom myself, and my husband too, to step out from that organization to begin to think differently, feel differently. I didn't realize when I was in it. Well, first of all, I'm a feeler and I'm an empath. So it was very hard for me to be in the midst of what is the norm and to think outside of that. But I would still ask a lot of questions, and that's something God has put in me. But I would like to explore this because Jesse is totally for both freedom and what the Spirit is leading inside the church organization and outside. And so I thought that would be kind of a fun conversation.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
But I do think that, I believe that, I really do appreciate that about you, that you are, you go and you are led and you get things done, and you are a trendsetter, I believe, in a lot of ways. And yeah, it's like, whereas maybe I can be a bit strategic in trying to like figure everything out, and I take forever to not do anything.
Right.
You're like, I'm gonna go do it. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm gonna do it. And and you're bold, and I really do appreciate like how you are an activator, how you go into the world and you trust the Holy Spirit in the journey of it. So,
thank you. That's cool. Yeah, and in the midst of that, as I go out, I get out and recognize, I need some help here. Give me some some order.
Well, it kind of reminds me, and I, you know, is that I had this really great word, I think 20 years ago, with a mutual friend of ours who was prophetic and didn't feel like she fit in the church. And I, you know, I'm kind of the kind of person that I love the church, meaning because I had never really felt like I belonged. That's kind of my thing. That I, you know, didn't really know what family looked like, and trying to understand what it means to connect. And so I love the gathering and the belonging and the doing things together. And that doesn't always have to be church. It can be in other areas. It can be a business. That's why I love building a business as a team and all these things. But I love the idea of gathering. But I was talking to this one woman and who was prophetic, and she's like, I don't feel like I fit. And God just kind of downloaded this really cool, this vision of, like a puzzle. You know how when you make a puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
most people,
Mm-hmm.
if you do it correctly, you do the border first. Yeah, see, you got this, right? And I look at that as the box, or that's the church, or
Right.
or maybe better yet, that's the body of Christ in my analogy.
Yeah, I
But
like that.
if you're like a piece that is just kind of in the middle somewhere, but
Right.
you don't really know where you fit on the borders. You're this random middle piece.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, what do I fit? What do I do? You may feel isolated,
Mm-hmm.
but what do? Well, in a puzzle, you find the other colors around your area and you put them
Mm-hmm.
together,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually you'll find where you fit. And I
Yeah.
think that's where, to
Yeah.
me, that's made me reconcile some of this, where like some people don't feel like they fit in church, or the body or whatever. But I think there's a way for us to find our group, find our people, and I do believe that eventually we're going to find our way back to each other and connection.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Something that I've landed on at this point, as far as what I believe or that I feel about, well, I'll just say in our region, about the church organizations in our region. I've seen different groups branch out and go through similar things as what I have been going through. Like, okay, I don't think I fit here anymore, so I'm going to see where the Lord leads me.
Yeah.
Some people will start a group on bitterness towards the church.
Yeah.
That's not a good foundation.
No, yeah.
Some will start by saying we want to do everything different than what was done. That can get too lopsided because there is good in it. There is some good in it. Lots of good in church model. I just think there's a lot more to it. Or maybe not even a lot more. Maybe just some tweaks. I don't know. I'm also experimenting and learning.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you are hearing the Lord and you are having others coming alongside, that's a good sign that you're on the right track. Not always, but
not a lone nut out there. But
yeah. But you feel that peace and that confidence and that, like, whoa, I'm finding my tribe. This is so cool. And it's community. And, you know, like some people have said, well, I'm worried that you're not getting community and you're forsaking the fellowshipping of the brethren together.
Or accountability.
And I've thought about that and a lot over the years. And it's like, well, actually, when I was in the church organization, I didn't really have accountability or close relationships. I found out I had a lot of ministry relationships.
Yeah.
And when we left the church, different churches, those relationships just were gone.
It's sad, yeah.
That made me really sad. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute.
People are people, I guess.
What was that then? So that's not saying it was all them, and it was probably partly me too, you know, like, but you don't realize that in ministry and chasing after a vision, you can get so caught up on that. You're not relationally connecting. You're not emotionally connecting. You're not being real. You're living for the vision. You're trying to fit in to what is expected. And pretty soon you're not showing up fully in all of you.
You're just doing the behavior. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah. And I found that a lot of other people were doing the same. Because then when they weren't in church, they were a bit of a different person. Or, you know, not everyone, but some people. There's just kind of a confusion in that. But then the other thing is, I feel that our churches around here are really good for new believers. This is my perspective.
Love it.
And
we'll talk about that.
Yes. That is a great place for new believers to begin. And then when you feel like you've gotten that foundational new believer steps and like just learning the basics of Christianity and like getting to know Jesus, then you can step into some other things, maybe connect with groups outside who are specializing in because they are called to evangelism or teachers or prophets or whatever, that you're more like, oh, I really want to grow in that. And you can go to that group and then begin to grow in that. And it's just almost like recognizing the freedom that there is, that it's not about, oh, I'm of Apollos, oh, I'm of Paul, I'm of Christ Center. I'm of Life Bible. I'm of,
Yeah.
that's where it starts to get weird. And then it's like, oh, are you leaving our church to go to their church? Then it starts to feel like gangs
there's an
and control and like weird stuff that was never Jesus's heart. That is not Jesus's heart. It's family, yes, and I understand loyalty and relationship, but I'm starting to see that you can have those connections all over the body, the organic body that's spread out throughout the region. And, the main keys are not to isolate, not to get stuck, not to only gather with people who are all thinking the same thing.
Yeah, your echo chamber.
Yes.
Who all think you're amazing.
Yes. Just gather yourself with yes men so that you feel like yes.
And yes women.
And yes women, exactly. So that's just a little bit of my thinking in that. Oh, and then the fivefold. Yeah. I feel like the fivefold has a big part to do with the balance that we need as we go forward.
What you may experience is there may be some vacuums sometimes,
And the churches that I see mostly, it's the one leader leading. Everything is under that leader's perspective, I feel like, instead of just an overseer who is helping to empower all of the other, there should be 5 functioning. I understand there needing to be a main decision maker, because you're going to get to points where all 5 are thinking something different and can't agree 100%. But it's kind of in that sense to me like a business. You have the one who has to have at least the 51% ownership.
I do agree with that.
Yes. And so that makes sense to me, but it's not so that they can lord it over you, but it's so that when you get to that crossroads of where you're just stuck, and then it's actually a heavy responsibility of Lord, I need to hear your heart. I don't want to direct this thing in any way that it shouldn't be going. And so you need someone who is willing to really sacrifice all the opinions of man and fear of man and just everything, lay it all down, and will you stand on what God is leading to direct this forward with? So those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts about.
Love the thought. There's a lot of good thoughts. But yeah, and I think that the 51%, oftentimes in my experience in my own business, that 51% is a person who usually is the one to die first, the one to serve. And that's kind of the thing.
Yes.
So I've done a lot of collaborative projects and wrote in a lot of different books with other people. Maybe not one main person, but I had the idea for the book, but she had the heart and the emotional impact. And so for me, I was the one to die first and hey, this is your story. This is important to you. And I felt like I was serving, and that's what I do with my clients too. Like I serve their vision, and technically they have the final say in their own book. But I can see even with business projects as a leader, I can essentially be the first to be one to die and love them well.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be hard at times, because I mean, I love ideas, and it's fun when you come up with an idea, and there is a part of you that wants credit for that. I don't know if it's just because you want credit, you're just like, wow, I had a good idea, and it's fun that you're known for that idea.
And that's where I think that anytime, I'm doing a course right now on kingdom collaboration, actually, and it is when you collaborate on anything, whether it's a project, a relationship, or even church or ministry, is what is important to you. I think it's really important, because is the idea important to you? Is the mission important to you? Where is your heart?
Yeah.
And I personally think that when we can actually bring all we have to the table, and then also all surrender that to the table and the process, and learn to listen. And same with marriage, it's you got to learn to listen to one another and say, if we're fighting, well, what do you need and what do you need? And oftentimes there's a third option that meets both of our needs, but it takes that wrestling that true. I think is really important in that. But you brought up interesting other things about the church. I mean, it's I know for me when I'm in business, because I know that, yeah, the idea of freedom and going off and being free and having your people, and that is great. I have a unique experience where I've actually had very little negative experiences from the church. I felt very empowered, felt very loved. And there's a long journey of why I think that maybe what happened. I do think that it's not perfect, but for me, as I'm going off into business, I'm finding myself more and more needing that. I don't want to say it's covering or accountability. I don't know, but there's like, it can feel very lonely doing your own thing, even with a team for me,
Okay.
and I'm like, I would love to have somebody above me, not lording over me,
Yeah.
but above me to glean from, to get wisdom from, to get prayer covering
Mm-hmm.
from, to help me break through some things as I
Mm-hmm.
build a team and all this stuff. So I think that we have done gatherings not perfectly, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes because I'm such a, I want to fix it, kind of thing, and part of me like, what is not fully great about modern day church? I mean, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things that is good, but there are some things that maybe could be tweaked a little bit. Yeah.
Right. And also, why couldn't you get that from just someone in your community, or, someone you respect and you see living the fullness of God in their
I
life?
guess it all comes down to maybe, yeah, how you're right. But how much authority and accountability do I give over? Because we're seeing people in the church kind of failing now in some ways. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of leaders falling, and I think that part of the what I'm noticing is that the common thing, and yeah, and whether you're in church or not, it's like, are you humble enough to have somebody speak into your life?
Yeah.
And are you able to be submissive? And I think that sometimes that we're too focus after the vision, or we don't want anybody to speak into our
Right.
lives. And so you're right, that's not necessarily in or out. That's just a
Mm-hmm.
note, a trend that I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And I want that. I
Mm-hmm.
want to have people in my life to,
Because for
yeah,
me, the other part of that is like, uh, I thought I needed the leader's approval or wisdom or insight, but
yeah,
usually those leaders have no time for you.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I found it refreshing to realize, oh, there's a lot of wise, mature
yeah.
Christians out there who have walked the walk and are not trying to lead hundreds of people
Mm-hmm.
and not taking false responsibility for you, that it's much more healthy
Yeah.
accountability than trying to have a pastor be your accountability or your covering, which I have an opinion about.
We all have opinions, but yeah, but we also have shared experience of where a leader did do a good job of
Mm-hmm.
empowering us, and both of us when we built that school together too. In some
Mm-hmm.
ways, so I think it all depends on how much freedom, because yeah, you can be a leader. Like, I mean, for me as a business owner, if I'm pioneering a new project, and I say, hey, so and so, let's work on this project together. I can be micromanaging. I can, or either, like you said, sometimes pastors don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have too much, or they're overly controlling.
Mm-hmm.
Or really, any leader can be overly controlling.
Right.
Or I could say, go off and do this thing, and then don't give you anything,
Yeah.
and not give you any resources. And so I think that it's a leadership is a blend, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I watched in some of your other Kingdom Copies, and you're mentioning that oftentimes pastors are very busy because they're doing
Mm-hmm.
all the fivefold, right? They're doing
Mm-hmm.
everything,
Right. Right.
and they're teaching, they're evangelizing, they're doing administrative stuff, they're teaching all, they're trying to love the people well. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that we have overly taxed, our people,
Yeah.
as well in the
Yeah.
church too. So it's a lot of
Right.
functions, a lot of different
Yeah.
nuances, I think.
And that's why I think it would be so helpful even for those pastors that feel like they're supposed to do it all. Like if
Mm-hmm.
they could really let go of some of the control, some of them maybe it's not control, it's other things involved, but it
Mm-hmm.
tends to turn into control because they do feel falsely responsible
Yeah.
for everyone. And if they would allow other leaders to rise up and then raise up other leaders, and
Mm-hmm.
you can continually, like a family,
Yeah.
you don't keep fathering your 18-year-old son.
You let them take over. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's why I've seen really good situations where there actually has been more like a team of pastors, and I've seen that's really helpful, where it's like, you don't, I'm trying to go into the whole history of church, but I think that we have the non-denominational movement kind of broke off from a denominationalism, which had a lot of structure, but also negative things. And I think that it served a purpose for a period of time, the denominational structure. But it's like you were saying, we only gather where we agree, not
yes, that was very dangerous.
It could be dangerous. I mean, there's a safety in that where we don't get into false prophecy or false doctrine, these kind of things, but it can be dangerous that we only gather where we agree. I've seen it really really great when we have leaders not necessarily agreeing. I mean, there's only like a few core doctrines that I think that are actually like, these are convictions.
Right. Like, I believe and agree. There should be some things we agree on.
But that's very little, I think.
The foundation.
I call it convictions, persuasions, and opinions. That convictions are like, Jesus is Lord. These kind of things.
The Bible is the Word of God. Right.
But like pre-trib, post-trib, are more persuasions. And that we can wrestle together. And I have found it very healthy family that we can gather even if we don't agree on certain things.
Exactly.
And we can even be a leader here, and we can wrestle out on, even like we're doing right now. We're wrestling out in front of people because we're not afraid to be messy. And I think that is maybe what we're needing to see more of in church or different things, that we're not afraid of wrestling it out and finding and reasoning together.
Yes. Exactly. I really feel like it's a huge key. And when I came up against that in many different churches, even free churches, it was like, we're set on, no, this is the way it is now. I feel like a lot of people camp on the truth they come to and forget there's still more. Being free to even ask questions. When I started to recognize asking questions was threatening, that literally shocked me.
That's scary. I haven't had that experience, but I can empathize that, and I'm sure many people had that experience.
Yes, exactly.
I can't ask questions. I get labeled as this thing. I've had people, demonize me on all these things. So I completely understand that those things happen as well, especially women, I think, too. Sometimes.
Yes. There's definitely been a misogyny thing in the church for a long time.
We need a misogyny therapist, right?
To massage those knots out.
Yeah, exactly.
But I have seen tons of growth in that. I'm not saying I have seen a lot of misogyny in the more recent years. I didn't even know that was a thing. I was so ignorant, honestly, because I just tend to come with all of myself and just all my heart and like, oh, you're gonna love me.
You can love me. Well, that's not the love, right? Yeah, here I am. Yeah,
I'm the king's daughter, aren't you?
I'm king's son.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so, anyways, I have had to learn things in life, and I've been the wrecking ball sometimes and didn't realize it. But I also was very ignorant and naive in ways too, and would hit into a wall that I'm like, what is happening? But I can acknowledge and recognize, sometimes I haven't known how to ask the questions gracefully. I didn't know I was threatening someone or, like making them very uncomfortable. To me, it's fun. Like, not fun to make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Fun to find out more. Like, what else is here?
Deep and, we're both that. We'd be challenged. Yeah. And it's okay to challenge. Right. It's not being threatened to challenge people. Right. But sometimes people don't want to be challenged. But everyone is different. And it just reminds me, because in my space that I'm working with authors, oftentimes you can replace the word publisher with pastor in some ways, where they think that, hey, I have this book from this book from the Lord, this ministry, and they write it, and the publishers reject them in some ways, and they can feel like, well, but the Lord told me this thing, or maybe even as an editor, like I come in and say, you know what, I love this idea, but what if we do this? And this is not quite, you said you love the developmental edit, but some people don't. Some people are like, no, this is my mission.
Right.
The Lord told me this is how it has to be. And I'm like, great, you're on your own, and that's fine. If you want to be on your own, but if you want to. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not a client of mine in some way. Oh, but I'll help them publish their book. I'll say, okay, give me some money and I'll publish it, and that's fine. But I think that in my experience, when we're able to say, to work together to help edit it, to work together to help, collaborate on the cover design, because I know what is selling. And it's not to squash your vision. Ideally, we'd find a way to love your vision as well as love the market, be authentic and marketable, work together, help publish it and get it in the right places. It's that collaboration that I think is really beneficial. And I hope that sometimes pastors are trying to do that, are trying to say, how do we help your ministry? But I know that they don't always do that, but I hope that's their heart. And sometimes it's control, but I think that sometimes we need to know what kind of the role is for us to be moving forward in things too. And so I think it's a nuanced and very, everyone has different experiences.
Right. True. And actually, that is surprising for me to hear you say you haven't really run into any of these things in the church organization.
Yeah.
And you have a point. My oldest sister, Autumn, says the same.
Yeah.
But also there's big personality differences, for one.
Yeah. Well, and I've only been to like 3 churches, I think, in my life. Maybe 4.
That's another thing. Right. So that's true. Even in the midst of our experiences, there's nuances of how present and what were the circumstances, what kind of church was it,
all that
we tend to see ourselves from the optimistic perspective in dealing with situations that you were hurt or rejected or whatever. But I do like to learn from those experiences. So I want to see, okay, what did I do wrong? What did they do wrong? Or did we just completely misunderstand each other? How can we better this, grow from this, mature from this, etc.?
Which I love that. And and you're definitely humble and all that. And like we're on this path of learning what is ideal. And I think that, I can see that you are introspective and you're humble and you're learning like, okay, what did I do wrong? Because like we can be the problem, but they could be the problem. And that's with anything, right? And I think in any fight or any disagreement, and I remember one time where I disagreed with a roommate about cleaning a house or whatever, and he was like 99% wrong. The Lord convicted me on my 1%.
Oh, that's a hard one.
You know what I'm saying? And so I had to go back and apologize. And I'm like, but he's like so much more wrong than I am. But it's that journey of how can we actually be purifying and I think that you're doing a great job of that. You're asking the right questions, and you're both purifying yourself and calling out and disrupting. And that's a hard place to be. And so I want to commend you for being in the middle of that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a learning path for sure. But I do enjoy it for the most part. I am loving this freedom to experiment, try things, talk about that. And meeting, I mean, I already know Jesse, but getting to know
do you
people's
really know me?
Story. Right. I mean,
but
getting to know people's stories and allowing you guys to get to know some of the amazing people we have right here in our region. We have tended to idolize the guest speaker, the traveling prophet, the famous worship leader, etc., and totally glossed over the treasure and the wealth of the people that are right in our neighborhood. And that, when I started to recognize that in some of the churches that I was in, and when I would talk to the people in the midst of the people, I'm like, why are you not up there? Oh my goodness, you have so much to share. Oh my gosh, you're doing that with your business? That's amazing. But we hear from I don't even know what percentage that would be that's on the stage, 1%?
And that's what we can agree. We definitely agree on that. I think that, like the collaborative, I think that people should be, I mean, I have a dream of like, okay, business owners sharing about their topic, and people you hear about the early church. They brought the word, and somebody else brought this and the sing. And everyone, it's more of a collaborative effort. And so whenever I take the stage, I find myself often like asking questions to people, like what do you think, whatever. And I'm like, that's not normal, but I'm like, why not? Why? It's more scary because I haven't prepared ahead of time. But if I can give back and bring people
out.
up, and that's where I think we can agree on that.
Yeah,
as the
our heart.
collaborative
Yeah,
heart of,
totally.
yeah.
Yes, and so this is kind of experimental too. We're trying to figure out how can we collaborate on these things, and I wanted to highlight him as the business he's doing and how he can help you, and you guys can be thinking of how to spread this, and you probably have a book you want to publish. Reach out.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. So anyway, this was fun.
This is great.
Thank you for sharing, and I hope that's helpful to you. And please do share this if you feel like this is helpful to someone writing a book, learning about stepping outside the four walls of the church, whatever. Just please do share. Let's collaborate. Let's be the body outside of the four walls.
And you have comment section, right, too? If
people
could talk about it. If anything I said, that you questions disagreed with, or anything she said. But no, it's good. It's good to really have that open dialogue. And so, as creatives, or as anybody, we're on a mission to change the world. And I just thank you for being a part of this call with us, or this interview. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. It's wonderful.
Cool.
Yes.
And to change our neighborhood.
Yes. Change.
I'm on to the neighborhood. He's on to the world. We're Swift.
Disagreement again.
I just have to include it. Yes. Okay. Come again. Please share. Hope you had fun. We did.
We had.
So that's what matters.
Yes.